I challenge people to say, if you think the number of hours that's acceptable per week for playing video games is greater than 0, what is that number? Because I think the truth is, if we can just be honest with ourselves, you're going to maybe say 1 hour, you're going to maybe say 2 hours, like over the whole week, but that is about it. The math doesn't go much higher than that without this being a real source of regret and remorse.
If I could actually focus and sit down and play the games that I bought, I could get through a few 80-hour games a year with the free time.
Most people work like 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day.
Yeah.
Get home, let's say 10 hours. You cannot be gaming more than 4 hours a night at most. At most.
Are you kidding me?
And getting to sleep and getting up for your job the next morning?
People do it.
They do 5-6 hours a night?
Yeah.
What are they on speed?
Lifestyle gamers, man.
All right, 6 times 4, 24 hours, and then each weekend they're doing probably 10 hours a day then.
They're living life on microwavable soup and Mountain Dew, whatever.
That's why we can't have universal health care. There it is. We change priorities as we get older. We don't have time to sit home anymore and just play tons of games. Like, by making these games that people beforehand know, oh my God, it's going to take me 100 hours to complete this, you are turning some people off, I think, at the same time. Some people might just want a shorter game. You'd have a vocal minority say, yeah, I want to play a game for 150 hours. Well, most people don't.
I have a regular customer who, I've mentioned this stuff before, but it's on my mind because I have this regular customer who came in yesterday. He was just saying that, he was talking about how there are certain games that he likes, but he can only play them on weekends because he gets home from work and he's tired. And, by the time he starts, these games drag so much out that it doesn't feel like you can ever really get a meaningful 1 hour play session in of some of these titles.
It doesn't feel like you did anything.
It doesn't feel like you did anything because everything just takes so long.
Yeah,
you can't really throw on Fallout, Fallout 4, especially if you've never played it before, and play for an hour and feel like you've really done anything of any merit.
Yeah, it's weird. I just looked up. I'm trying to compare it to something like books, because books can take a lot of time to get through. There's no book that takes 30 hours to read, I don't think. I looked up one of my favorite books that's a big book. I think it's 700 pages or so. Great Expectations. Classic Dickens. I love that. There's a website, I guess, that tracks how long it takes to read. It takes 6 hours and 22 minutes to read Great Expectations. And that's a long book. That's a long quality book with no filler.
Sure.
And yes, it's not interactive like video games. I get that. But I'm just trying to compare different mediums with each other. Be like, no one would say, wow, I wish Great Expectations took 12 hours to read. No one does that with books. Right. Are there that many people out there that can buy multiple 80-hour games in a year and not be fazed by them and just be like, all right, I'm fine?
There are, and I mean,
do they have jobs? I mean, are they trust fund kids?
There's nothing wrong with stating your ethical claims in such simple terms as good and bad. I think actually there's a kind of cowardice very often when people refuse to state the claims they're making that simply, that honestly, that directly. But it's also often important for us to challenge ourselves to calibrate what we mean by good and bad, because most likely if we try to put a number to it, if we try to put a quantity to it, it's neither going to be 0 nor is it going to be 100. We get into some interesting questions of what good and bad really means in practice. Now, an example that might seem surprising to some of you would be learning a foreign language. If you tell people that you're learning French, if you tell people that you're learning Chinese, if you tell people that you're learning Japanese, if you tell people that you're learning Sanskrit, any sort of challenging foreign language, they're very likely to say to you, that's good. People think it's good and wonderful to learn or study a foreign language, whether that's as a hobby or as a job or as a course of education you're paying money for in some capacity. You're paying to take lessons, you're paying a teacher. People just say that's good, that's positive, and the vast majority of people do not question what good even means in this context, and they don't question the opportunity cost, right? Opportunity cost is a technical term in economics. They don't question what you could be doing with that time that you're not doing because you're studying that language. So if you just change it a little bit, if someone says to you, they've decided to start learning Chinese, and you say, oh, that's good, that's wonderful. Then they say to you, yeah, they've got a 2-year-old daughter, and they never see their daughter because they're so busy studying Chinese. Say, oh yeah, I'm studying Chinese 40 hours a week, so I barely see my kid anymore. All of a sudden you think, wait a minute, maybe that's not good. Maybe that's bad. If someone tells you, oh yeah, they're learning Chinese, like, oh yeah, it takes so many hours, it's so much hard work, I'm failing my classes at school, they're studying some other topic, they're studying chemistry. Oh yeah, I'm neglecting my classes at school because I'm studying Chinese. Oh yeah, I'm getting fired from my job, I'm ruining my professional life because I'm studying Chinese. Well, guess what? It takes hours and hours and hours to study Chinese. It's a huge commitment. It's a huge sacrifice. And the fact is, there is something else you're sacrificing. There's something else you're not doing in order to learn Chinese. And already the question of what good means, it starts to take on a different meaning. If you just think, okay, so if you think learning Chinese is good, is it good for 2 hours a week? Is it good for 10 hours a week? Is it good for 20 hours a week? Is it good for 40 hours a week? And in case you hadn't guessed, these are questions I've had to ask myself in my life. There may also be implicit assumptions about this simple word, good, that are linked to the outcomes, right? Like the assumption is after 5 years, you're going to be completely fluent in Chinese, or maybe even there's an assumption of a particular career or a particular university degree or particular credential you're going to get after 5 years working in the language a certain way. And what if you don't get those outcomes? What if that assumption, what if that optimism was false, that you work for 5 years, you don't get that outcome? So again, real quick example. It's easy for people to say writing a novel is good. Many people encourage me to write a novel because they've read my writing and they've seen my YouTube videos. They know the kind of stories I can tell, and they know I'm good at writing. They know I'm good at telling these stories, and they're interested in my type of content. Okay, if you think writing a novel is good, we could repeat all the things I just said. That, well, how many hours a day is it good for? And what about the other things I'll be sacrificing? Like maybe I won't have time to make these YouTube videos because I'm writing this novel. We have all those considerations. Maybe I'm neglecting my responsibilities as a parent, as a student, as an employee to write this novel. But then what did you assume about the outcomes, the results, when the novel was finished, right? Like, did you assume it would sell 1 million copies? Did you assume it would sell 10,000 copies? The vast majority of authors who are published in the year 2020, they don't even reach as many viewers as this YouTube video will reach. All right. I used to work in the publishing industry. We published really interesting, really important original books that would sell 500 copies in their total lifetime. It would sell 500 copies in 10 or 20 years. Right. In the first year, some of them would sell 20 copies. It would just be a few specialized libraries or something. These are important original books, by the way, like really meaningful stuff. So the life of an author, if you're evaluating it in terms of its outcomes. And now to just switch very briefly to an example of something bad, something that's perceived as bad. You guys probably know I'm generally a pretty sex positive person. And it used to be, whether I did live streams or Q&A sessions, people would ask me for my kind of moral position on pornography. And I'd often kind of say, look, what's the big deal? Like, come on. Men want to look at pictures of beautiful women. Women want to look at pictures of beautiful men. Like, this is part of life. Like, can't we just kind of have a relaxed attitude? And then sometimes people would write back to me, and they'd talk about cases of pornography addiction or, people they know in their lives. And they write back and say, well, you think it's no problem, but what if it's 4 hours a day? What if it's watching pornography for 4 hours a day? And I've got to say, okay, so now we're calibrating it. Now we're putting a quantity. Now we're putting an amount of time to it. And that didn't even occur to me because I completely, utterly assume we're talking about like 5 minutes a day. Like maximum 30 minutes a day. But I think most heterosexual men would find it really boring for more than 10 or 15 minutes to look at, this kind of thing. But okay, but I don't even know. I don't know the percentages. I don't know the statistics. They probably exist out there somewhere. But this is not even engrossing in the way that watching the news is engrossing. I mean, I'm interested in political news. I spend a fair bit of time watching and listening to the news. So to me, those things just aren't comparable. That's not conceivable. That's not even a problem I would imagine if you're asking me about pornography, because I don't even calibrate the problem that way. Okay? So when we're talking about video games, yes, I can make a simple statement: video games are bad. And I think it is cowardly when people refuse to say that. Playing video games is a bad thing to do. But it's also important to look past the simple adjective and ask, what are our assumptions, what are our assertions on either side about what bad really means when you put a number to it, when you quantify it. I have to tell you, I don't think of myself as an extremist on this issue. I think of myself as a moderate, because I've said repeatedly I'm willing to admit there's some quantity of video games that's so low, and we could even say there's some quality of video games that's so low that they won't negatively affect your life in these ways. There was a time when I played the original black and white Space Invaders while I was exporting and transferring files between my two computers. It's not worth describing the situation, but that would take kind of 3 minutes and it would be annoying. And I had this copy of this really primitive, really simple game, Space Invaders, and I would play it for a couple of minutes while I was doing this technical task because I had to wait for the computer to complete this operation. Now, I still don't think that's good. I think it would have been more meaningful or more useful even if I just sat there and stared at the wall and thought about my life or thought about what I'm going to do today for 3 minutes. I think that's more positive. But this is qualitatively such a simple or primitive video game, and also quantitatively it's so little time. I'm willing to concede this. The qualitative element I normally don't talk about in this channel, but I'll admit now a video game I would be interested in playing still to this day. You can guess how I remember this game. There was a game I never played called Gem Fighter. It was also marketed under the name Pocket Fighter, and it's actually a parody of other video games. It's very simple. It's very primitive. Just like what I said before about pornography, I cannot imagine playing this game for even 30 minutes. I would probably play this for 5 minutes or 3 minutes at a time or ever. It's incredibly simple. It's incredibly primitive. There is a qualitative dimension where you could look at something like this and say, well, this is not equivalent to playing Skyrim. This is not equivalent to playing any of the first-person shooter games that people find so addictive. This is not equivalent to playing StarCraft, World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, these current immersive games. There's a little bit of a dimension there for talking about the simplicity versus the sophistication of games. But then, as we all know, the most important quantity is time. I think, if you're really being honest with yourself, if you just think about 3 hours a week, you can say, this is too much, this is something bad and wrong I would regret no matter what the game is and no matter what the circumstances are in my own life. So if you think, out of a 7-day week, if there was one day of that week, if there was a Saturday where you sat down and played a video game for 3 hours, I think you would look back at that and regret it. I think you'd look back at it and think, wow, I could have done something better with those 3 hours. And I think that even if the 3 hours are spread out, over 3 days or whatever it is, there was 1 hour a day for 3 days, I think if you're just being honest with yourself, you can look at that and say, this is something bad and wrong I regret. I could have done something better. I wish I'd done something better. Even if you had spent those 3 hours listening to the news. I mean, we don't have to compare this to something tremendously positive in your life. It could just be something like that. You're learning a little bit about what's going on in politics. But again, I think of myself as a moderate when I challenge people who just in the last few days have been coming out to me and saying that they think it's acceptable to play some quantity of some video games, and they think they can still lead a meaningful life and a positive life and have all these aspirations and do these good things. What I say back to them is not, no, the quantity must be zero. I challenge them to imagine what that quantity really would be. We all have different responsibilities in our lives. I have fewer responsibilities than most. I could play a game like Gem Fighter, just use this example. It's a game that somewhat interests me, partly because it's a parody of other games. I could play that game for 3 hours today. I don't have a job, unless you count YouTube. I don't have a lot of other responsibilities. And by the way, this particular game is so simple or so crude, it's not going to have any emotional effect on me. I'm not going to dream about this game. It's not going to, it's not going to make me feel excited, and it's not going to make me feel sad, and it's not going to make me feel angry if I lose. I'm just not going to care about this game on any level if I play it for 3 hours. But if I did that, I would be thinking about a whole lot of little things I really should have done with that time. Even just things I should have Google searched during that time. There's some Google searching I have to do for my lawyer, some things I have to look into for my ongoing legal case. There's some things I have to Google search about education. I'm looking at other universities I could enroll in and career path. There are some things just on a brainstorming level I could have done with those 3 productive hours in my life, let alone, alternatives like studying Chinese. There are a lot of productive things I could have done with those hours. I would really regret spending those 3 hours this way, even if there were no other considerations. And so I challenge people to say, if you think the number of hours that's acceptable per week for playing video games is greater than 0, what is that number? Because I think the truth is, if we can just be honest with ourselves, you're going to maybe say 1 hour, you're going to maybe say 2 hours, like over the whole week, but that is about it. The math doesn't go much higher than that without this being a real source of regret and remorse. Now, finally, I just want to say, I consider myself a moderate. When there are people who talk to me who are more extreme in their opposition to video games, they have arguments I can't refute. Like, I think the people who are more extreme than I am, I think they're correct, and I can't argue anything in favor of my moderate position. So I've mentioned that I felt it was appropriate and good to provide my daughter with video games during a train journey. When she was stuck sitting in this seat for several hours, all she can do is sit there and look out the window. You can't really play, you can't do much. Now, we also provided her with pencil crayons and markers and drawing and coloring. We actually did a lot of stuff with her during that train journey. I'm not going to list it off. So we weren't completely passive parents. My girlfriend Melissa and I, we were really engaged with her. And even when she was playing the game, we were talking with her and we were really involved. So I just say we were very much present in her life, and we were enjoying her company while she was playing the game. And we had lots of other activities. However, there are people who got in touch with me and said to me, no, that I'm wrong. That really the right thing to do as a parent would be to refuse to provide the kid with video games, even if you're stuck on a train. That really good parenting would be for the kid to have the experience of being bored on a train, of staring out the window, would be to have the experience for the kid trying to amuse herself and trying to amuse us and pass the time and do these other activities, which we did have. That actually it's bad and wrong, and it's lazy or bad parenting of me even to provide a video game for those few hours when she's stuck on a train for a long train journey. I think that's a strong argument. Like, I can't say that I'm right and they're wrong. I can just say that I'm being moderate, that I'm making a compromise, that it seems reasonable to me, even though, you know what, the other side, it seems to me they're right. I think the other side, who insists that it absolutely has to be 0 hours per week, not 1 hour or 2 hours, I think in some ways they have a powerful argument. When I was a kid, I played a video game with no graphics at all. I'll give you a screenshot here. It's called NetHack. It's part of the roguelike series of games. So if you Google for this roguelike, it's probably what you want to Google. I had dreams about this video game. I had dreams in this video game, where, like, when I was dreaming, I saw the world as if I was inside this game. Not many times, a couple of times I had that experience. So if you think it's only super immersive, video games with wonderful graphics and wonderful sound effects and this social element of massively multiplayer online game, if you think it's only those games that can really dig into your brain, that can really affect you, or that it's only games that you play for like 10 hours at a stretch, because you can guess this isn't a game you play for that many hours. If you think those are the only games that can really get you, that can really change your life in this way, you're wrong. The simple and crude games that I played as a kid, they screwed me up, they damaged me, to be blunt, they ruined my childhood. in a lot of ways. And I know even if the games with more immersive graphics and storylines and the social element of online play and the gambling element too, the element of, loot boxes and paying money and getting rewards, there are all these ways in which video games today are worse. But I have to admit from my own experience, the simplest and crudest video games already, they are bad. And I can't make an argument that just 2 hours a week is okay, because I know it's possible for it to be 2 hours a week, especially when you're a kid, and still in your mind, like your life is revolving around that illusory other world. That's still maybe those 2 hours a week, maybe emotionally for you, that's the highlight of your life, which is really sad and tragic. But for a lot of people, it's not that the game is something so great, it's that they have nothing else positively going on. We all have to be aware of the trap of being moderate just for the sake of being moderate, of compromising just because we think compromise itself is some kind of wonderful moral cause. When you talk to Frenchmen, when you talk to the French, they all believe they're living a moderate, balanced lifestyle. They think they're practicing moderation in everything. When they wake up in the morning and start eating pork for breakfast, they eat beef for lunch, they eat lamb for dinner, and they'll tell you they barely eat any meat at all, that they have a moderate lifestyle and balanced nature. They will tell you with no irony that they barely drink at all, right? And if you get to know some French people, they're drinking serious amounts of alcohol, like 5 days a week. And they think that's moderate. They think that's balance. And if you say to them, hey, I think you should quit eating meat, I think you should quit drinking alcohol, they'll say back to you, dead serious, that they believe in moderation and everything. So how can you ask them to quit? Moderation is not an end in itself. Compromise is not an end in itself. In this sense, being reasonable is not an end in itself, because when you say being reasonable, all you're talking about is accommodating something that's bad and evil and wrong. When you come to the conclusion that playing video games is bad, as simple as the phrasing may be, that doesn't mean and that doesn't require that you know something better than video games that you could do, that you have something better in your life to replace it with. If you come to the conclusion that eating pork, eating meat is bad and evil and wrong, you may not have all the answers. You may not have a better diet in mind. You may not have a better philosophy in mind or what have you. There may not be something positive to replace it with. But just recognizing that this is bad, that this is something you want to eliminate for your life, that's going to be the beginning of asking a set of questions, really uncomfortable questions, that'll lead you to a more meaningful life. And it won't be the same as my idea of what a meaningful life is or must be, right? You're going to ask those questions, and with time, you're going to come to your own set of answers.